right on the border with Russia, something huge is coming out of the ground. Rows and rows of concrete pyramids embedded in the ground as far as the eye can see. Ditches deep enough to swallow an entire tank. Minefields, sensors hidden in the woods. That's 700 kilometers of this, stretching across 3 countries. It's the largest defense project Europe has built since the Cold War. And nobody builds something like this on a whim. No one buries 700 kilometers of concrete on their own border without being very afraid of what might come from the other side. Then comes the question. Waiting for what? This is where things get weird. For 4 years, Russia has been trying and failing to take Ukraine. 4 years. So explain something to me. Why is it that right now Latvia, Estonia, and Lithuania, the 3 Baltic countries right next to Russia, are digging trenches with the urgency of someone expecting enemy tanks tomorrow morning? What are they noticing that we're not? The answer to that question, well, says a lot more about the kind of danger Russia has become. And when you understand what's really happening at this border, you'll look at this concrete wall in a completely different way. Let's start by taking a hard look at the real state of this war. Because there's a huge difference between what Russia promised to be and what it became. When Russian tanks crossed the Ukrainian border back in 2022, the plan was to take the capital Kyiv in a few days. It was supposed to be quick. It was supposed to be easy. It was supposed to show the world the power of the second largest army on the planet. 4 years later, that army is bogged down. Ukraine not only held on, but this year it started taking back territory. At the beginning of the year, for the first time since 2023, the Ukrainians gained more territory than they lost in an entire month. Russia is losing about 1,000 men a day. Yes, that's right, 1,000 men a day. And they ran so short on armored vehicles that the victory parade in Moscow, which is meant to showcase all their military might, went by this year with almost no tanks on the avenue. For an army that promised to swallow Ukraine in a week, that says a lot. Now, keep that image in your mind for now. Because this is where almost everyone jumps to the easy conclusion. Most people think, oh, if Russia can barely make any progress in Ukraine, then it can't really be a serious threat anymore. And that's exactly where the mistake lies. Does a bogged-down army give up? Yes, the army might give up. But a regime that has bet everything on a war does not. Consider the situation Vladimir Putin has gotten himself into. He turned this war into the very reason for his government's existence. He made the entire economy revolve around it. He sent hundreds of thousands of men to their deaths. A leader in these conditions can't just go to his own people and say, "Look, everyone, it was all for nothing." I thought it was better to stop. Stopping for him is more dangerous than continuing. So if the front door is closed, if brute force invasion doesn't work anymore, what's left? That leaves the back door. And this is where things get more dangerous. Because a cornered enemy doesn't become harmless, he becomes more unpredictable. The truth is, an enemy who still has a lot to lose, well, that one thinks twice. But an enemy who feels like he's losing everything starts doing things he wouldn't have dared before. The tight spot Russia got itself into hasn't taken the danger off the table. It just changed the form of that danger. It swapped the tank coming from the front for something much harder to see. And much harder to fight. Do you know what this backdoor actually is? Well, let me tell you a story that really happened. At the bottom of the Baltic Sea. On Christmas Eve, an old oil tanker, one of those that nobody really knows who owns, was crossing the Baltic Sea. Underneath it, at the bottom of the sea, there was a power cable that connects Finland to Estonia. And, as it sailed, this ship was dragging its anchor along the ocean floor. Not just for a few meters, but for more than 10 kilometers. The anchor tore through the seabed like a knife and cut the power cable. And it wasn't just this one. It also cut communication cables. Finland seized the ship. And then came the most revealing part of the whole story. That ship was part of a secret Russian fleet. The famous Shadow Fleet. A bunch of old oil tankers with no clear owner on paper that the country uses for two dirty jobs. One, to dodge sanctions and sell oil secretly. And the other, we're finding out now, causing damage under the sea. But when the case went to court, the tribunal released the crew. They couldn't prove it was on purpose. And that's exactly where the danger lies. Look, the damage is real. The cable was cut, the power was cut. The loss was real, but what about the blame? Whose fault is it? It's practically impossible to say. Could it have been sabotage, or was it just a poorly secured anchor? You can never prove it. And it wasn't an isolated case. There were at least 11 such incidents in the Baltic. Cables cut one after another, always in the same way. Always impossible to prove. This is war. But it's a war designed never to look like a war. And there's a very specific reason why it's designed that way. There's a line that Russia can't cross. And that line has a name, Article 5. You probably already know the rule. An attack on a NATO country is an attack on all of them at once. So if Russia invades Estonia with tanks, it's not just facing Estonia. It's facing the United States, Germany, France, the whole world at once. It's the kind of war nobody wants to start. So Russia does the math. Invading openly with tanks triggers Article 5 and brings the whole world against it. But cutting a cable at the bottom of the sea? Releasing a drone that got lost along the way? Or pushing crowds of immigrants to the border on purpose to overwhelm the neighboring country? None of that is clear enough to trigger the rule. It's damage without a signature. It's war that flies under the radar. And if you think cutting cables and releasing drones is already a low blow, wait, it gets worse. Because the most calculated blow of all didn't come from the bottom of the sea. It came signed with a pen on an official document. In May of this year, Putin signed a new law. And this law deserves all your attention. Because it is the most dangerous piece on this whole board. The law authorizes Russia to use military force to protect Russian citizens abroad. Russians who are imprisoned, prosecuted, or persecuted by courts in other countries. It sounds bureaucratic, I know, but pay attention to what this really means. There are about 40,000 Russian citizens in Latvia and more than 80,000 in Estonia. Under the new law, if any of them are arrested or prosecuted, even if it's completely justified, Russia gives itself the right to send troops to protect that person. You just saw an excuse for invasion being manufactured right in front of you. And it's not a theory. It's exactly the same justification that Russia used to invade Georgia in 2008. It's the same justification it used to take Crimea from Ukraine in 2014. We're just protecting our own. That excuse has already worked twice. And now Putin has turned it into law. He filed it away, ready for the day when it becomes convenient to use it. So let's connect the pieces, because this is where the whole plan shows up. Look, each thing on its own. A drone that crashes is an incident. A cut cable is an accident. A new law is just a piece of paper. Each one alone seems like a small thing. Easy to ignore. But all three together on the same border in the same year? That's not bad luck. That's a plan. And that's the secret of the plan. Each piece pushes the limit just a little bit. None of them alone is big enough to start a war. Now tell me, if you were Latvia, Estonia, or Lithuania, small countries with Russia right on your border, would you just sit back and wait to see which one of them will be the last straw? Of course not. And now that concrete wall from the beginning of the video finally makes sense. Those concrete pyramids I showed you at the beginning aren't just for show. They're the answer. There are 3 rows of concrete, so close together that no tank, no armored vehicle can get through them. Behind them, trenches to stop tanks. Minefields. 700 kilometers of this connecting the Baltic countries to Poland. It's the largest line of fortification that Europe has built since the Cold War, and the plan is to finish everything by 2028. But there's an important detail here. Many people think this is just another static wall, like those used in World War II, and that the Germans simply went around. The Baltic defense line is different from that. It's a carefully designed trap. The concrete isn't there to stop the enemy on its own. It exists to force the tanks which advance in a line to do one thing, to move out of a straight line. To swerve, slow down, squeeze through a narrow passage. And that passage leads straight into the weapon's sights. Behind the wall, long-range rocket launchers are waiting, capable of hitting targets up to 300 kilometers away. In other words, the concrete doesn't stop the tank. The concrete gives away the tank, but the concrete wall is only half the answer, because concrete doesn't shoot by itself, and that's where the West's strongest move comes in. Before we continue, if you like this kind of analysis, the kind that doesn't stop at the headlines and goes after what's really happening, subscribe to the channel now, because that's what we do here every day. Watch. At the same time that concrete is going up at the border, NATO is moving people. A lot of people? There are entire army corps that used to be in a city in Germany called Münster. This corps is being moved to take over military command of Estonia and Latvia later this year. And an army corps is not a small detail. It's a command structure capable of leading about 50,000 soldiers in an emergency. Until now, all the defense of the Baltic countries was coordinated by a single command, over there in Poland. With this second command, NATO doubles its response capacity in the region. The term the officer used to describe the idea was mass with speed. And this matters because of a cruel geographic reason. The Baltic countries are small. They don't have space to retreat. If Russia attacks, there's no time to think. The defense has to be set up beforehand. So, the concrete slows down the enemy, buys precious minutes, and the Army Corps is the one who uses those minutes to respond. And at sea, the West launched a permanent naval mission precisely to keep watch on that shadow fleet that was cutting the cables. As you can see, the West saw the move coming. They understood that the threat had changed shape and started to move on both fronts, on land and at sea. So that's it, everything's solved, right? It would be nice if it were, but the answer isn't that simple. This is where the real tension of this story lies. Because that wall will only be ready in 2028. And even if it were ready tomorrow, there's one thing concrete can't stop. But there's a detail that changes everything. In that undersea cable cutting incident, the court released the crew. The drones flying over the border are always navigation mistakes. The invasion law talks about protecting citizens. Can you see what these all have in common? None of them are clear enough for someone to point a finger and say, "This is an attack, let's strike back." And that's where Russia's real target lies. It's not Baltic territory. It's something much harder to defend with concrete. It's the West's willingness to react. Think about how NATO's Article 5 works. It only matters if everyone believes in it. The day Russia cuts the cable and Europe hesitates. They launch a drone and Europe debates whether it counts or not, using the law to send troops. And half the alliance says, "Hold on, let's not start a war over this." On that day, Article 5 becomes worthless paper, without a single tank having fired a shot. And look, this isn't a hypothesis, it just happened. At the end of May, during yet another night when Russia was firing more than 200 drones at Ukraine, one of them crossed the border and landed in Romania, a NATO country. It was Duran 2, a Russian drone loaded with explosives. It hit an apartment building in the city of Galassi in the east of the country and exploded on the roof. 2 people were injured. And for the first time, a building where ordinary people live was hit on NATO soil. And do you know what happened next? The answer will show you how this war really works. Romania had fighter jets in the air with permission to shoot down the drone. And even so, it got through. Romanian authorities said the drone may have been diverted after being hit over there in Ukraine. Was it a deliberate attack, or was it a wartime accident? Can you see the pattern here? We're asking the same questions. You can't say for sure what happened or who launched the attack. But the Russian drone hurt people on NATO soil. That's a fact. Do you know how the alliance responded? No, they didn't activate Article 5. They didn't respond militarily. They used Article 4, which basically means, let's meet and talk about it. So they summoned the Russian ambassador. They released a strong statement condemning the recklessness. And that's it. Notice what that signals to Russia. That you can hit a building in NATO territory, injure people, and the response will just be a meeting. The red line has been crossed. And nothing serious happened. Every time this happens again, the next time gets easier. What was unthinkable becomes just another piece of news. It becomes the new normal. And that's how, one step at a time, Russia took Crimea in 2014. Without ever starting the big war. This is the real war. It's not about the border, it's about doubt. The truth is that Russia doesn't need to defeat the West on the battlefield. It just needs the West with each incident to hesitate a little more, to become a little more divided, to doubt a little more whether it's worth defending a small and distant country. Until one day the promise to defend the Baltics is so corroded from within that no one believes in it anymore. Neither Russia nor the Baltics themselves. And that's why that wall is going up now. Stone by stone. Concrete over concrete. The Baltics know that concrete alone won't win this war. But it sends a message that no drone can erase. Here, we take this seriously. Here, doubt won't get in. The real danger was never the tank that shows up at the border with months of warning. It's the blow that comes disguised as an accident. The Baltics are not defending themselves from yesterday's war, the war of tanks and borders. They are shielding themselves against tomorrow's war, a war that doesn't want to seize territory. It actually wants to break the West's will to respond. And no one has yet been able to prove that it exists. This story is far from over. Every cut cable, every drone, every troop movement is a new chapter. We'll be here to tell you about each one, right? So, if you want to follow how this story unfolds from now on, subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell. The next turning point on this frontier is just a matter of time. And before you go, I want to know your opinion. In your view, will Russia really test Article 5 in the coming years? Will it take the step that drags all of NATO into a confrontation? Or will the dirty war stay like this, with drones and cut cables, without ever turning into something bigger? Write in the comments below what you think. I read the comments. And this is one of those cases where nobody has the right answer yet. See you in the next one.